compelling detective story, a cloak and dagger action, and a romantic drama, all these stories were taken from real life. The history of Kazakhstan is inseparable from the world history. Reflections on history, our version.
The beginning of Abai's way. Look into the soul intently and spend some time with yourself. Both me and my ways are a mystery to you. Abai told his descendants that he had an air of mystery, and it was absolutely correct. The very beginning of his way was distinguished in mystery. They lived in the same city and in the same period. Moreover, the same photographer took their photos. Two great writers met in a mysterious way. Who was Abai's teacher? Today we know very little about the time he spent in Semipalatinsk, because a lot of documents have disappeared. Anyway, there are some facts which cannot be proven officially. We can say that they met in the town. Chapter 1. Unproven Possibility. No written information about Abai's life or childhood has remained. Only Abai and people close to him remembered a lot of his works. There are no memoirs or diaries or publications dedicated to Abai. Did Oezov sit at this table? Yes, he worked here. There is only limited documented information about the poet, especially about his human destiny as well as his creative work. Abai did not retain his manuscripts. They changed hands and were lost. During research, Oezov could only find 6 of Abai's autographs. First and foremost, Oezov was a scientist. First, he studied everything referring to Abai and the historical era he had lived in. Oezov was born in the same district as his idol had been. He was Abai's relative and was friends with his son, Turagul. Mukhtar Armakanovich said to himself that in adolescence he had been fortunate enough to meet the poet's colleagues who knew him personally. He talked to Abai's wife, his beloved Aygarim and Dilda. He heard a lot of stories about him. Some of them were exaggerated, but some were real. Many of these stories were not included in the novel for various reasons. Probably Oezov heard a story about the meeting of Dostoevsky and Abai too. Perhaps the writer did not mention these facts on purpose, as he was under control. He was constantly accused of nationalism and admiration for the feudal past. When Oezov was working on the novel about Abai, Dostoevsky was considered an unenlightened writer. According to Lenin, he was too spiteful, so very few people were engaged in the research on the period he had spent in Semipalatinsk. The connection between the famous surnames and the names in the creative work activity and biography of Dostoevsky provides a very interesting research topic. So, was the meeting of Abai and Dostoevsky possible? It was in the second half of the 19th century in Semipalatinsk. Chapter 2. Striving for the Truth. The Kyrgyz steppe begins here. The city is quite large and thickly populated. There are a lot of Asian people here. The good city of Semipalatinsk lacked a lot of various things, including pavements and electric lighting. There was not even a bridge. In general, the urban amenities of the city were in poor condition. Culture and education in the city were in a similar condition too. The first school was opened only in 1833, but students acquired minimal knowledge there. This fact was not surprising because this educational institution was funded from the city's budget and only about 2 kopiekas were allocated per capita. It is unclear when exactly Kunanbai Uskumbai and his son moved to Semipalatinsk. As for the place where he lived and the people he made friends with, there are only superstitions. There are even different versions of the years during which he had studied. The majority think that he studied from 1855 to 1859 in Ahmed Riza Madrasa. Although the building has remained, it was in a different location in Abai's time, on Saldaski Street. Unfortunately, very few structures have remained. Mainly there are mosques with 1 or 2 minarets in the Tatar region. The Ahmed Riza Madrasa was opened in the 1850s. It was called the New Method School. It is declared that the creed of study was an acknowledging Allah with the help of poetry and science. Imam Ahmed Riza was quite well educated and wrote 3 philosophical treatises. When receiving an education, Abai studied in the Turkish, Arabic and Persian languages, the Eastern poetry, language science, mathematics, geography, natural science and even the basics of medicine. Your hearts must be able to see in order to notice the light of truth. Fizuli, Shamsi, Saikhali, Navai, Sadi, Firdausi, and Khaja Hafiz. All of you help me to strive. In the madrasa, the ardent young man inspired by the great poetry started writing poems. Presumably it was during the last year of his study. In general, in Kazakh history, Semipalatinsk was always the place where the spiritual life was concentrated. At the same time, the 14-year-old teenager entered a closed-minded school, keeping it secret from Mullah, and attended it for a few months. However, in order to go to that school, he had to speak the language. Anyway, it was not easy for an Asian boy to enter that school. It means that somebody who lived there paid attention to the talented Kazakh boy, taught him the Russian language, and introduced him to the works of Pushkin and Lermontov. He became interested in Russian literature, the world news, and all the secrets of the world were written in the Russian language, which is why Russian attracted his interests. Incidentally, exiles certainly worked in schools which Abai attended. There were quite a lot of them in the city. The majority of them were highly educated people. The idol of the book by Awezov said, "I was a student who studied the Russian language without a teacher." Was it really so? The coincidences are surprising. Famous General Kornilov's grandfather worked for Kunanbai as an interpreter from 1849 to 1853. Perhaps he was the poet's first teacher. Kunanbai built a school in Karkaralinsk and was asked to send a Russian teacher there, but his name is unknown. Boys found out about the Russian laws and customs when receiving education. It was written in a letter to the colonel, Kleist. Probably Kunanbai himself found another teacher for his son in Semipalatinsk. Chapter 3. The Crossroads of Destiny. A child is born with the thirst for knowledge. A person cannot become a person unless he uncovers the visible and invisible secrets of the universe and explains everything to oneself. Abai studied at the madrasa at the same time as Dostoevsky lived in the town. Kunanbai paid visits relating to the service to Wrangel, who was Dostoevsky's friend. Thus, we should not exclude the possibility that the great Russian writer and great Kazakh poet met in person. Kunanbai was a senior sultan of the Karkaralinsk region. This responsible position demanded regular meetings with the district attorney, Alexander Wrangel. However, meetings of Dostoevsky and Abai might not be related to Abai's father's business. Despite their age difference, both of them had a lot of the same acquaintances. A mosque built by a merchant, Tunanbai Kaukeanov, in a Tatar settlement in 1840 is among the sights of the city. Kaukeanov was a senior representative of one of the Kazakh authorities. He was the first whom the government allowed to build a wooden house, and his settled life started on the left riverbank of the city. According to some information, Kaukienov was Kunanbai's relative. At the same time, it was documented that Dostoevsky and Wrangel often paid visits to Tunanbai. It is known that Dostoevsky was quite interested in everything connected with the steppe. He wrote in his diary that life was in Asia. He saw our expanses on release from the penal servitude and said, "There in the boundless steppe, bathed in sunlight." There was a yurt, a woman was bustling around it, and smoke was curling. It was freedom. The writer often went horse racing, which was held near the city. It was the boys' favourite pastime. In general, Semipalatinsk was not a large city. Incidentally, Wrangel lived in a merchant Stepanov's house. Stepanov's mother, who kept the house, was Kazakh. Probably the boy dropped in this house on his own without his father too. Could the boy wearing a robe and a skullcap on his shaved head hear from beneath the window somebody reading the prophet poem by Pushkin with a hoarse but very expressive, heart-stirring voice? According to his reminiscences, Pushkin and Gogol would often read aloud in the house where Wrangel stayed. I do not think that Dostoevsky read only there. Abai could have met Dostoevsky there. I think he was interested in the Russian writer. It is known that Dostoevsky gave lessons to earn money. He could not do it during the first years. It became possible after Baron Wrangel helped him to fit into society and his service obligation was loosened. When I was 12, Dostoevsky taught me for a bit for more than a year. He came to us to give lessons at various times. Probably he came when he was not busy. A lesson continued for an hour, but sometimes lasted for 2 hours. Although he was kind and lenient during the lessons, once I was punished by my teacher. He made me stand in the corner near the stove and the doors. A friend of Wrangel, who was Petersburg high-ranking official, could be a good teacher for the son of the respected Kunanbai. Why not? Dostoevsky would suddenly like the clever and inquisitive young boy too. The veil hiding the mystery of such people's life is always lifted slowly. Probably in 100 years, a document about this period of his life will be found. However, today we do not know about it. This is a warrant officer Dostoevsky in Solomon Lyubin's photo studio in Semipalatinsk at the end of 1850. This is another well-known portrait in which we can see Abai Kunanbayev with his son 50 years later. Unfortunately, no photos of the great poet at a younger age have remained. However, researchers say that such photos were taken at the very Lyubin's photo studio. This fact is not surprising because he was the most popular photographer in Semipalatinsk. Epilogue: The Mysteries of Abai's Way. Time is the strands of fog along the mountain ridges. With hope you look at the foggy expanse. You follow the flow of faceless days, the constant alternation of which makes your eyes tired. Could the Kazakh youth be taught the language of the Russian writer or just listen carefully to Pushkin's poems? Could it really be true? Yes, it could. Unfortunately, this alluring version has not yet been proven. The alleged meeting of Abai and Valikhanov belongs to the same category too. It is known that Cholkan often went to Semipalatinsk. Could they meet there? Anyway, could Abai not mention about such important meetings? However, the documents related to these events could be lost. In his childhood, Abai could see a luxury governor's train and a young Kazakh wearing a Russian uniform. He also could see Valikhanov later. He was passing through the Semipalatinsk on the way to Isykyul and back when he was travelling to Kashgar and back. They could also meet when Cholkan spent most of the month where he visited the Asian part of the city. Abai certainly read Dostoevsky's works. In particular, he constantly borrowed journals where the writer's works were published. However, no notes about the works he read have remained. it is unknown whether Abai translated Dostoevsky either. Thus, there are a lot of secrets relating to the destiny of the great Kazakh writer. Both he and his way remained a mystery to us.